Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation, God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It's not on the agenda, but it probably should be, so the first thing would be the approval of minutes. Are there any, there's multiple sets of minutes, there's the regular meeting, and of course, there's the special meeting for the snow emergency we had on January 18th. Then there's also the meeting minutes for the public hearing. Does anybody have any additions or corrections to any of those minutes? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve all three sets of minutes unless someone has a reason not. It's made by Commissioner Materi to approve all three sets of minutes as written. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Colbert. Is there any more discussion on the approval of the minutes? Not hearing any. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Minutes approved. Second part would be the approval of the agenda. Are there any additions, corrections, questions? I guess I have one addition I would probably like to put towards the end of the meeting would be the discussion for the hiring of the VA official, just at least some discussion on it. We don't have to necessarily make a decision, but probably just talk about the format, timelines, things like that. So probably put that down for 2:15 to 2:30 there or something on the agenda. Are there any other additions, corrections, questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended. Motion by Commissioner Holm to make to approve the agenda as amended. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Materi. Any more discussion on the amended agenda? Not hearing any. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Agenda approved. Okay. We are now on old or unfinished business will be the proposed ordinance 23-01-01. We've had our first and second readings, as well as the public hearing. For the sake of reference and everything, I believe I will read the ordinance again one more time to refresh everybody's memory. So, ordinance number 23-01-1, an ordinance of Emmons County, North Dakota to amend the zoning ordinances of Emmons County, North Dakota. Be it ordained by the Board of County Commissioners of the County of Emmons, North Dakota, that the following sections of the Emmons County zoning ordinance are hereby amended as follows. Section B, subsection B, 2B1, located on page 16, shall be amended and revised to read as follows. A map of pipeline route which clearly indicates that the pipeline right-of-way does not pass within 2,640 feet of an inhabited residence, within 200 feet of any other building or surface water body, and is not within 100 feet of a highway right-of-way or section line unless perpendicular to said right-of-way or line. Also would be subsection B, 2B2 shall be added to state as follows. A variance for the setback for an inhabitant residence 2,640 feet may be allowed if the application for permit includes a signed and notarized waiver of setback from inhabited residence signed by residents of each such residence located within the proposed pipeline right-of-way. Pipelines constructed for the transmission of water are not subject to the setback for inhabited residence. That is the first and second reading. And now we will open it up for discussion by the commissioners on how we want to move forward with this. The only thing I will note is that there is a 7-minute video that I would like to be played because it was requested to be played during the public hearing, and I thought for the sake of time and acoustics and everything that we would not play it then, and it would probably be easier to play now. So if you want to watch it after your discussion, before your discussion, I think we should probably just watch it and then after that discuss what we want to do. So, okay, Jeff, Josh, if you want to play it.
It sounds awful, so.
the emergency.
Decided to, take a day and go fishing. I had a job and everything. Like I said, decided to take a day and go fishing, and they have a brother cousin there, but I was like brothers. Actually, to Warren County to go fishing on my uncle's place. And we went up there and we fished and had a nice time. And we were on our way back, and we got around about 7 o'clock. I saw big smoke. I saw there we have. It actually just over big clouds smoke up in the whatever up in the air. And I called my mother immediately. And I told her, I said, "Mom, this pipeline look down here. We want to come get y'all." By the time we turned on the prairie, and cousin went to bed before he was driving at the time. He said, cousin, the cops. As soon as he said that, that was it. We, we woke up in the hospital.
Passed out of that point.
Yes.
Okay. Now, we have also with us, we have Dr. Brown, and Thelma is, Emmons' mother. Okay, and Thelma, tell us, about that fall and what you were doing when they came in and what happened.
I'm sure will. At that time, he called me about 15 minutes to 7 or after. And he told me tomorrow the pipeline is exploded. It's me, Tyrone, and Ed coming to get you. They about 5 minutes away from me. So at that moment, it's just dumbfounded, what is this? Chaos. And when I got the phone call, I immediately to keep the children still outside. I ran it down, and I'm on inside the house, and I'm like, what do you do at this moment? So I got children, I put them all in my bed. You keep on this way. They come, Tyrone, Andrew, and the break, they were gonna come regardless. So when they didn't come, I just gathered them, I don't have to let me get the panel, and we'll close the door. And people would call me, telling me I had to get out, got to get out. So I was saying stay, so I was saying go, it was just like chaos all around me. Which way you couldn't go? I couldn't go. I had a plan. I had a plan to try to straight.
Okay, and you were grandchildren,
They were
and the youngest was,
he was about 4 months at that time.
okay, and the other two were a little bit older.
Yes,
And when they asked,
yes.
and that started getting a little worse.
Both of them had that, but the little girl, she even had it more than this explosion. And anyway, I got in the room and I put them in there, I'm knowing that they would come, and my mind is, well, they were,
Just went to bed, basically with the kids and
Yes.
and gave it up.
I gave it up.
Yeah,
What it would be, but,
you couldn't get out.
no,
Okay, all right. Now, let's go to Jerry Briggs here, who is our fire person and head of the fire services in Warren County. Tell us, came into town that they do because of the, you're going through a role in the rescue and how you got involved, and just take us through the rescue that you actually performed with the Emmons over here. It's two people in the park.
Sure, we didn't know anything about the Warren County, we were at Gumbo. Walk. And fish, and then you got the. We. So. First instinct.
You thought they were all dead.
we should, we could get in and check for
And to do that, what specifically did you do to check?
the children, just check for breathing.
And what did you find when you checked the pulse and breathing?
Very shallow breathing.
Okay. So it was in good shape.
It's still dry. I love it for it and yeah, change the breathing. It'll push it along. Yeah, the more we sit there, it gets, the more we get told. We get to sleep, so we can come along. We can do it. So we did.
Yeah, these are 3 over the minute.
Yes.
Did you?
We discussed making one of the 15 minutes to get them to the new ones. So we're all three.
Because you didn't think they.
So I guess we'll open up this, ordinance for discussion amongst the commissioners, I guess, thoughts? Concerns, ideas?
I have major concerns. I have yet to this date, I've only been on here for a month and a half as a commissioner. I have yet to this day, even though I requested to see a copy of the easement, someone has not stepped forth and given me an easement copy or a complete copy of the easement, or it's just an exhibit. I was given a copy of the easement last night from the landowner, and I glanced at it, didn't look through it thoroughly, but by glancing at it was totally disgusted how somebody could sign that easement when it's so one-sided. And I attended the Burley County meeting last night and listened to the feedback from the general public. I don't know how we can go along with this easement and this pipeline when we're only being paid no royalty to that landowner with that pipeline cutting through. They're getting a one-time easement payment, and the easements are strictly a blanket easement. They do not have it defined where they're cutting through a quarter, meets and bounds at starting points with the angles, whatever. That quarter is subject to that easement in its entirety. And I don't know how we as commissioners can justify going along with this project. That's my opinion. And it's a toxic, toxic substance. And they say Beulah line up to the Canadian province. They claim there's been no problems, but last night in testimony, it stated that up in Canada, there was a problem. And I cannot recall the man that submitted that. If anybody outside here does have the name of that guy, would you bring it forth today? Do you recollect it? Remember the guy that was giving that presentation, the gray-haired guy?
You're talking at the Burley County.
That's a Burley County meeting.
Okay.
And then we had also at that meeting, a young gentleman came in, he's got 2 sons that are engineers. Summit has never given us how do you wanna say? Any, from an engineering firm, the plume of this pipeline at 2,380 PSI, 24 inches in diameter, on a 20-mile span, the amount of, and volume pressurized, when it's ruptured, if it happens, and it will happen eventually, there's nothing that's subject to no error. They do not tell us in an experimental mode or model how many cubic feet of material is gonna be released into the atmosphere. And with a 20-mile wind, a 30-mile wind, and humidity pushing this material down low, how far will it travel and how far is it gonna spread out? We're all gonna get condolences from Summit if something does happen to all of our families. And that's what we'll get as a feedback. But you'll live with this forever. We all will. And I, as a commissioner coming in, I have a hard time making this decision. One guy up here, a voice for everybody. And you people, we're all gonna live with it if something happens. And I don't want that burden weighing on me that I approve this and something happens to these people out there. That's my opinion. And I'm not the best speaker in public like this. I get a little choked up, so I'll openly tell you.
Anybody else have anything to say?
I kind of agree, I don't think it's a good idea, and I just, the setbacks are way far, not far enough back, and why isn't it, if they're gonna do it, why do they go around to state land? Why don't they, what's the deal with that? You know, public land, the person's public land, they can go through, with the state land, they go around all that.
Can I elaborate on that?
Sure.
The state is the last one that'll sign that easement. The state comes with their own easement, with their own terms and conditions. There's no negotiating with the state.
So why can't the landowners do that? Why don't they have any rights to,
Because Summit muscles them.
just,
And if you don't go along with it, you use eminent domain. And I'm totally against that.
You know, and I think the more we learn about this pipeline, the more we realize how dangerous it can be. And, you know, it just, right away I thought, no big deal, but the more I'm learning about it, it's like, man, do you really want that to come through your county or something like that? Tax dollars, I mean, what's more important, a few tax dollars for the safety of people? I guess that's what I'm looking at right now.
well, I don't think there's even much tax dollars involved with that.
They claim we'll get 400 grand, which is subsidized by the state of North Dakota. And it comes from the general fund, which is subsidized by we the people. For 10 years, they're exempt. Who knows what it'll be after 10 years? They're projections. There's no guarantees in this. We've all experienced it, I think, and I shouldn't bring it up. I don't think an insurance policy complies with their projections come when it's all said and done. On their due date, of it's supposed to be paid up, and the dividends are supposed to support the premiums, but they don't. This is just a projection. Summit's gonna build this and Summit's gonna carve this pipeline. They laid their proposed site for the cheapest path to them. They don't have to go around US Game and Fish, wetlands, for mitigation. So they're gonna take the easiest path and come onto our property and push us, and you have no say with their thinking. And I don't believe that Bismarck will let that happen in Burley County, carve through that city. If they're so concerned about the general public, why don't they move it east and go north and way up north around Bismarck instead of carving through Bismarck on the east side? And they got these valves 20 miles apart, guys. I asked at our last meeting, why aren't there valves next to a farmstead and cut it in increments of 5 miles if they're so concerned about the landowner and his well-being, we as the people? Well, it's not in our proposed plan, they stated. So I'm gonna push back in this as a commissioner. I just don't feel it's good for the people out there of Emmons County and overall. Look who's on the end of this pipeline, who's pushing for this. Just follow the money. That's all I have to say unless I have another thought.
Is there any more discussion, ideas, amendments to the ordinance?
They have nothing in there as far as what would happen if something does break. Who's gonna take care of all these people? The local county sheriff and local EMS, they're not trained for any of this kind of stuff, but
I think the discussion, or probably part of the PSC requirement, is that I believe is once there's approval and the project starts moving forward, is that they're obligated to provide some training. You know, I don't know the depth of that, or, you know, if that's a one-day thing, if it's a monthly thing, if it's, you know, what special equipment that needs to be provided, who's gonna provide that, I mean, that's all, I think it's maybe probably up for interpretation maybe to the point, and maybe the PSC will lay out a little stricter guidelines with that, but there's, I would say it's gonna fall on the locals. I mean, the training and stuff might come from a different entity, and maybe some equipment through grants or something like that, but yeah, it'll be the local EMS.
I was told, is there merit to this? I was told that this CO2 depletes your oxygen source, and your vehicle will not run in that cloud. So they're talking that you will have to buy, and they state that Summit makes the remark, I don't know if there's merit to that or not, that you will have to buy electric vehicles for your first responders and submit the bill of purchase of that vehicle, whatever, to Summit to be reimbursed. But it comes onto the county's initiative. If there's merit to that, I have no idea.
I guess I don't know anything about that. I do know, I mean, the liquid CO2, it's basically like what you make dry ice out of.
Yeah.
You know, I know I use I use compressed CO2 to freeze water lines when I have to do a repair, and you're not supposed to use that in a confined space, because it, you know, I mean, whether or not it depletes the oxygen, overpowers the oxygen, basically it makes it so that the air is, you know, it's dangerous to breathe in a confined space. So I would say that it's, I mean, you're on point, whatever the scientific term is, whether it depletes the oxygen, overpowers the oxygen, whatever it takes, it gets to the point where, yeah, it's difficult, if not impossible to breathe. So, I mean, just in my small scale, we're dealing with it with a little bottle, I would imagine it's the same scenario times whatever the size of the pipeline, so, yeah. I guess, you know, just to work forward on this ordinance and where it's gonna land, I have a few ideas. I guess the one thing about it is I don't wanna be too restrictive to the point that we're just eliminating pipelines from Emmons County. I believe in pipelines. I think pipelines are the safest way to transport just about anything. I mean, I make a living burying pipelines, so they're water, but still. So, the question is this pipeline different from probably the pipelines that we've had in the county? And I'd say it's fair to say that this is a different pipeline. It's gonna react different, the product is different. I mean, it's just a different pipeline. So, to try and get my head around what is fair, but yet still trying to be safe, the first thing I did was I just kind of started calculating. And I just went on the internet and I use a pipe volume calculator. It's pretty simple. You type in the diameter of the pipe and the length of the pipe, and it gives you a volume, which I use all the time for my plumbing stuff. And obviously this is just static liquid, it's not compressed, it's not CO2 versus water, it's just a number, just to at least get your head around something. So a 6-inch pipe in 1 foot holds 1.46 gallons, 1.5 gallons. So now you go to a 12-inch pipe, which was twice the size, so it's twice the gallons, right? A 12-inch pipe is almost 6 gallons. So even though you went twice the diameter, it's about 4 to 5 times the volume. Once you get up to a 24-inch pipe, it's 23.5 gallons in a foot for a 24-inch pipe. So just to give you an idea, it's roughly, not pressurized, just static liquid, but the idea is basically to go from a 6-inch pipe to a 24-inch pipe is basically about 20 times the volume in basically 4 times the size of pipe. So now when you want to take I heard some comments last night at the Burley County meeting was, Well, I don't know how much volume is in 20 miles. Well, 20 miles is roughly 105,600 feet, and you times that by those gallons. So in a 6-gallon, or a 6-inch pipeline, it'd be 155,000 gallons in 20 miles between the valves, if you were gonna play that game. 155,000 gallons. In a 24-inch pipeline, it's 2.5 million gallons. I mean, when you're comparing these pipes, I mean, once you start going up even an inch or two, the volume is just, it's crazy. And so even comparing, if you want to talk setbacks and conversations on this pipeline, a big part of this project is going to be 6, 8, and maybe 10 or 12-inch pipelines, but Emmons County, we're at the end of the line, we're at 24 inches. I mean, this is, and whether you want to, if, you know, with pressure, you know, they mentioned at the public hearing, you know, the pressure isn't always the same, because whether you're next to a compressor station, in the middle of it, you know, it could vary. But that volume is still there to a point. I mean, we are on the highest volume point of this pipeline. So our setbacks, in my mind, need to be thoroughly explored and probably should be the most extreme, because we are dealing with the biggest volume of this pipe at any time. Whether it's at its highest or lowest volumes, we are getting the highest. We are higher than basically any other point.
At the end.
So, I mean, just to give you a comparison, when you're talking pipe sizes, I mean, a 6-inch pipeline to a 24-inch is just no comparison. It's not even close. So, my idea for a setback, and this is merely just up for discussion, was that we would basically do it on a scale. And that scale would be a 0 to 6-inch pipeline. The setback would be 1,320 feet, which is a quarter mile. Once you got to a 7 to a 12-inch pipeline, it would be a half mile, or 2640. And once you got over 12 inches, it would be a mile. Whether that's enough or not enough, I don't know, but I approached it from a just purely semi-scientific point, no scientist or pipeline engineer, but just as a common sense value. I feel like you have to separate those pipeline sizes in order to be fair, you know, to future projects as well. And so basically with this pipeline, it would be a mile. That would be the setback. That's
Bismarck was speaking, weren't they speaking at that meeting last night, and in their notes that they submitted, like a 2-mile setback as of last night until further discussion?
It could be, but I mean, I don't think they ratified anything or voted on
No, they
anything,
didn't.
so at this point, it could be anything, you know? I just feel like maybe just broadcasting a blanket on all these size pipelines and different size products, because even, you take a 6-inch oil pipeline versus a 24-inch carbon pipeline, in my mind, it's just two different worlds. It's not even.
One is gas and one is.
Well, that's what I'm saying, that's why you don't wanna just be like, oh, we're gonna do a mile setback on everything, because there's scenarios where you could.
See, a gas pipeline, you got.
My suggestion is to approach it from a little bit more of a, there's differences, that's my main point of it, you know, I think. And, so that's just my part of the setbacks. I welcome any other suggestions. My other suggestion as part of this would be, I know we're 200 feet from any other building, but I know there were discussions from other people that, you know, they might have maybe an uninhabited, nobody's living at their farm, but they might, or, you know, they're there every day working, they have a shop there, or they have something. So that 200 feet should probably get adjusted to something, you know, and we wanna make that less, cause nobody lives there, whatever, but,
I think it should be more.
I mean, 200 feet for sure, but what I'm saying is less than the initial.
Somebody could move on the farm, be the
Right.
same difference, so.
But it probably should be compared, it shouldn't be compared to an inhabited residence, but it should probably be increased to at least add some safety. And then the other thing to do would be to, just make sure that one thing about this ordinance itself is it doesn't really, it says a gas pipeline, but with CO2, it's a supercritical compressed liquid gas of various sorts. I mean, there's a variety of descriptions. So I think we should just make sure that we spell out CO2 along with gas, oil, coal slurry. And not only that, but probably even specify at the end, or any other substance deemed hazardous by PHMSA, because it's not just about CO2. I mean, there's a variety of different materials that either aren't being sequestered right now or created, or, you know, there's a variety of different things, and I don't think, you know, specifically picking out one source is the safest thing, so I think we need to spell that out too. So those are just some of the amendments and ideas that I had, just to keep the discussion moving.
Can I ask, any of you people that were there last night, do you remember the young man that approached at the end of the meeting? He had two sons that were engineers, and he come forth with the volume of material on a break, how many cubic feet it would be. Was it 8? Do you remember?
I don't.
Was like 8 million, or was it 80 million, what was it? Cubic feet of material, pressurized on a 24-inch diameter pipe at 20-mile span.
It's
What the
bigger-
plume would be.
It's bigger than what Aaron's saying, but I can't remember exactly what.
I can't either, but it was 8 something.
Right. Well, and then like I said, my calculation was basically just a liquid volume. It's just to show a comparison that, you know, once you increase these pipe sizes even an inch or two, it doesn't go, oh, it's twice the size pipe, so it's twice the volume. It's more like 4 to 5 times. So just to take that into consideration, not that we're putting setbacks on a 24-inch pipeline just like a 4 or 6-inch pipeline, because there could be different projects, you know, and that's one thing to emphasize with this variance process too, is at any point, this pipeline could be put almost anywhere. It's just gotta be negotiated with those landowners, and those, you know, if they wanna inherit the risk of having it closer to their property, then that is up to them, and that's where, and I feel like that is the safeguard, in the sense that we're not completely just limiting this project. If you wanna put it 500 feet from your house, and you feel like you're satisfied with the negotiation, the monetary amount, or the safety risks and all that, you can sign it, you can put it that close. I mean, obviously, there's probably some state regulations too, you probably have to abide, but anyway, if the setback's a mile and you want it 1,000 feet from your house, and you're fine with that. I mean, we had the same issue, or we had the same scenario with the wind farms. There's wind towers closer than even the state and county setbacks, but they signed their waiver release. However they negotiated it, they did, and they signed it, and so we have that built into this too, and I think that is,
Yeah, but somebody could come back on the county with who's reliable. I mean, if somebody would die from that, they said, I don't care if you come right next to the house.
well, that is a signed and notarized document. I mean, they're inheriting the risk on that, so I mean, that's, in my mind, that would probably, you know, leave the county relatively blamed. I mean, you can sue anybody technically, but whether or not you'll win, but.
It's still our responsibility too, to look out for people a little bit.
Right, but you still have to leave the responsibility for the landowner to be able to negotiate on their own land, though. That's where I feel like the variance is still, if I'm a landowner and I have no problem with the project and I want it to go anywhere on my property because I want this project, I should be able to say so, but then I'm inheriting that risk. I'm saying, hey, thank you for looking out for me, but this is what I wanna do. And I think that option should be there. It's there in case someone doesn't want, you know, because not everybody agrees with these setbacks, not everybody thinks it's a bad project or whatever, and those people should be allowed some options with their negotiation as well, so.
As the others do that don't.
Right, exactly, and that's why I think the variance gives you that option. If you don't want it, these setbacks are in place, they should be honored, these people at least have that, and if they don't agree with it, then you have the variance to allow it closer, and I think that's, you know, that even gives these other companies the tools to be able to place the pipeline where they want. They just have to negotiate differently with those folks if it's closer than the setback, so.
Can we set our setback at a higher distance and negotiate this as we move forward? It's kind of like selling anything. You could set a high price on it and negotiate it from, say, 1.75 miles down to 1.25 miles of setback, or 1.5 miles. You're never gonna be able to up it again.
Right.
Yeah, you can't go up.
Well, I think just if you're gonna amend any process, Joe, right, I mean,
What do you think,
that follows a public hearing and everything. I mean, you know, once you start this, you can't just, it's not really a living document. I mean, it needs to be kind of recreated almost, essentially, not?
We'd have to follow the same steps for sure, yeah.
Right, so you'd have to amend it, have a first reading, pass it, public hearing, you know, so I mean, the proper process would be to just try and put your best foot forward on what you think is the right way to do it, and probably stick to it. And I think that's why if you offer a scale, in my mind, that's where I feel like, you know, if you come in with just a blanket setback, and then someone's coming in and going, well, it's only a 4-inch pipeline, and it's only this, or it's a different material, now you're going, holy cow, now, you know, are we gonna allow this to go through? Well, now we gotta amend our setbacks again. I feel like this probably gives an opportunity to just, and if it's a big pipe like that, no matter what it is, it's running a lot of volume, then that setback should be higher, and I think that's, so, that's just my opinion, though. I mean, I get accused of being a dictator, but I try not to be.
The only other problem I got was with the depth of the thing. That's
Well,
not,
that's one thing I was thinking, can we negotiate how deep it can be, or can't we?
To my knowledge, I don't believe we can, because that is regulated by PHMSA, and the federal government regulates that part. Now, you could try,
but what's 3 or 4 feet?
well, 3 or 4 feet is what the current regulations are, I guess. I mean, I don't disagree with that, but I just, in some of that information that you received in your packets, I mean, it kind of explained that the role of the counties is the zoning and the setbacks. That's really our purview, a lot of it. As far as the construction and the engineering and scientifics of it, that's really kind of regulated by the federal agencies, and of course, the PSC probably has some leeway within the federal government, but I don't know if the counties have, I mean, I'm not saying you can't, or I'm not saying you can't push that, or if you want to amend that in the ordinance, fine, but that is something that, to what I believe, is probably a little outside of our realm and probably would get challenged, but.
The people out here from reading that easement last night, it states in there, well, it doesn't specifically state blanket, but it doesn't show, and I was told last night from the meeting I attended, it's a blanket easement. There will be no future development on that quarter of land as it states in oil and gas or coal development of any sort. You can horizontally drill under that quarter as they state, but you will never have oil and gas equipment on that quarter or those 2 quarters of land where it carves through for exploration. So that's gonna hinder that, guys, unless they horizontally drill in on it and you unitize them quarters of land, and it may come here someday. It's in the northwestern part of the state. And there are gas formations in this part of this state, there's no denying that. Will it ever be developed? I would say yes in the future, but who am I to say that? But that's my opinion.
Yeah, it's fine.
So just remember that that's a blanket easement.
It takes the whole quarter.
It takes the whole quarter the way it's spelled out, in my
It
opinion.
doesn't take just so many feet of that pipe.
They don't specifically say from starting from this corner west, that's where's the starting point, and cutting it at an angle and giving the degrees.
It just takes the whole.
It's the whole quarter.
So can you build a building on that quarter?
No, you gotta get the approval from them. So they'll sit at your table on everything,
Tell you what to do.
what to do.
Well, I guess that brings up one more point that I was gonna say, is when we're editing this ordinance or whatever, I think the setback should probably be from the center line of the pipeline. Just because if there is an issue with the right of way as far as,
Right.
if it goes all the way to the quarter line, well, now I think the center line of the pipeline is probably just the proper way to do it rather than the right way.
Right.
Cause otherwise, depending on their easement, of course, maybe that works out in favor too, cause I guess if they have the whole quarter and then you gotta stay a mile away from that quarter, I guess you're quite a ways away, maybe that's the right way to do it, I don't know, but with the right of way possibly changing or not understanding exactly how wide the right of way might be, probably going off the center line of the pipeline is probably the most accurate way to do it, but again, just an idea for discussion, but. Commissioner Culver?
Well, I guess I haven't studied it too much. I've been kind of sick lately, but I'm doing okay now, I guess. But some people even said I don't have a dog in this fight, but I own part of a house in southeast Bismarck, so I mentioned it pretty close. I don't think we need no pipeline running by, for sure. That's about it.
Well, and remember that this ordinance is not just for this pipeline, it's for the future pipelines too. So I mean, it's probably not gonna be the last one coming through no matter what, so, I mean, it might not affect your property this time, but next time it may. So I mean, that's the thing to remember. I mean, it's a county-wide ordinance to, hopefully for the betterment of the county, so.
I don't wanna stop development, but this is a different monster than an oil pipeline. If there's a break in an oil pipeline, the oil seeps from the pipeline. This explodes, and they talked about a zipper effect when they close these gate valves electronically in the 20-mile span, that pressure pushing that material, how it can create a zipper effect and open the line in the back behind the valve. Because it's pressurized, because you're shutting it down. And how fast will they be able to shut that gate valve down to close that 24-inch diameter pipe with that pressure? I don't know. They've never explained that to us.
They'll never shut it off real fast because like you said.
It'll buck.
Yeah. We can't determine how many valves go in there though, that's up to them.
That's in their engineering design plan. It's
Well,
not-
I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. I mean, the conditional use permit, you know, is probably more the arena where we would make any kind of determinations on if we want other structures a part of it or something like that. You know, as far as the setbacks go, I don't think that really has anything to do with it, and I don't know what our limitations are, you know, because obviously, we don't have a permit filed for Emmons County for this pipeline yet, but they have filed at the PSC, so with the PSC approving their permit, if that happens, yeah, I don't know what leeway we have after that too, as far, you know, we'd have to take a little bit of studying to see if we want something more than what they're asking. I don't know if that's something they'd be willing to negotiate with, or if we even have the right to ask that. I mean, that's just something, as the process goes, we probably have to find out. I would probably say, without knowing a lot, we probably could make some requests like that, or have that expectation. I don't know how far that would go. It's probably really, I mean, as far as the setbacks part, I don't think that really has anything to do
So
with
we're
this.
just dealing with the setback.
Well, this is just a zoning situation right now. I mean, because the main issue and the main reason why we're pushing this process right now is the PSC hearings are scheduled. And we have one scheduled in Emmons County for May 9th. The ruling is we've actually received the permit application from Summit and their representatives. That initiates a process to which they can't have a hearing within at least 45 days. They have to wait at least 45 days to have a hearing after we receive that document, which we've received. Now, they've set the date for May 9th. We have up to 10 days before the hearing to submit any zoning changes, any requirements that we have, based on zoning, not, I mean, I don't know where that lands, like if you can make engineering requests and stuff, and I don't know if we're qualified to do that anyway, but the zoning and the setbacks is really our purview. That's where we really have to, you know, make our minds up if we're gonna make a change, and then get it to the PSC 10 days prior to the hearing in our county, which is May 9th. So when we initially received that paperwork, it was sometime in January, and the 45 days would have landed us in February sometime. And so that's why we started this process now. Make sure we're, in all fairness, doing it properly and ahead of time, not that we're trying to do it at midnight on the last day, and so that's where this process has landed. So I don't think we should wait too much longer. I think we should make a decision.
Well, I think we're all in agreement that the setbacks aren't far enough,
Right.
you know.
I would say so. I would say the setbacks definitely aren't. And Emmons County really doesn't have a setback. Because the actual setback on the books is 200 feet. That doesn't even comply with the state. So the state would actually take over, and the 500 feet would take over. So technically Emmons County doesn't really have a setback. We're relying on the state.
Can we have different setbacks, like for oil pipelines or for toxic gas pipeline?
We should.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, I think that's all within the realm of possibilities there. I think you can. You know, the only difference and the only thing I would argue against is that if you're going to pick a different material or a certain material, that you should probably have some kind of evidence to back it up. I'm not advocating for or against, but if you go and you have short setbacks for certain materials, huge setbacks for others, you better have a reason other than that. You just don't want to go. Well, that's fine. I'm not saying you don't have enough information. All I'm telling you is that from the information I've gathered and everything, that just make sure that if you're spelling something out, that you're not targeting a specific industry or a specific material. Make sure that it's coming from, right, like the information you may have or have gotten from somebody. If it's verifiable, if it's defendable, then I don't see a problem with it. But just make sure that you're not just going well, we'll be fine with everything but this, and this needs to be 10 times what the other one is. That's-
Any kind of toxic gas, you know, I mean.
Right, I don't disagree with you, I mean, I will say this carbon is, from everything I've heard, from all the public hearings, all the emails, all the watching other counties, everything, this is gonna behave a lot differently than any other pipeline we've pretty much had run through the county, and so that is totally up for discussion, I mean.
This is the first made CO2 pipeline in the world, the biggest pipeline being built. And this is Summit's first experience building one. They have nobody that we can follow back on and see their success rate.
Well, I mean, just.
I mean, and I'm not degrading them, it's
Right.
just, yeah.
Right, but just to, to clarify too, like at the public hearing, I mean, Summit is not actually gonna be doing the welding and the bearing, and, it's more than likely gonna be a pipeline company who's more than likely built several, if not dozens or hundreds, but, so that, just to clarify that, not
Right.
disparaging either any of the comments, but yes, it's the first one they've probably overseen, at least of this size, and so not knowing how much oversight is on it from other groups or factions is a part of the issue too, but the PSC is probably gonna answer a lot of those questions. I mean, a lot of the things we're trying to discuss or solve here, the PSC is going to solve a lot of them too, just remember that. I mean, there's a state regulatory agency with a lot more resources than us that is going to answer a lot of these questions and hopefully hold them to just as high or higher standard than we're going to. So take some solace in that. I don't know how much you want, but just to say, I mean, we're not the only line of defense on this project. I think we need to just focus on what we think is a safe and reasonable setback away from inhabited residences, city limits, schools, churches, the input from our individual landowners and constituents on where they think this pipeline is at least far enough away to be safe, or at least allow a reasonable amount of time to, respond to action if necessary, that's the discussion, so. I don't think you're gonna come up with a perfect distance. I don't think you're gonna come up with what could even be safe. I mean, you look at these videos, depending on the right wind and the temperature and the time of day and all that stuff, 5 miles might not be safe. And I don't think a 5-mile setback is reasonable, and so you just gotta do your best to come up with at least a setback that allows, the least amount of risk with, not totally restricting every project from ever coming through your county as well, so.
Well, how do I say that? How can we ask if someone is concerned about the well-being of the people out there? What is their feeling on a legitimate setback for the safety of the people that live on those farmsteads or carving on the north side of a city? What is safe in their thinking under a pressurized 24-inch diameter pipe of a CO2 compound?
Well, I guess, without speaking for Summit, I would say their footprint of their project was designed to where they think it's probably safe. So if you have it 500 feet from someone's house or 600 feet, I would assume they wouldn't put a pipeline somewhere they didn't think it's safe. So they're either complying by specific laws or they have no issue with it going there. So I would say that would probably be the answer. I don't know if I'm right or wrong with that, but I think whatever setback they would tell you would, if they told you a far one, you'd get a far one, and if they told you a short one, you probably wouldn't listen, so I don't know if that would, just to be fair. In my mind, it's really not up to any one entity or corporation or anything to decide their own setbacks. In my mind, I think that's up to us, so that's where I guess I would land with it.
I've got a hard time, me myself, putting a number on this. I don't have enough.
It's gotta be at least a mile, it's a mile mark, I don't know, but it's gotta be at least a mile.
Well, and I don't wanna push the issue that, we only have 10 minutes left, so we gotta make a decision. I don't wanna be like that either. I feel like we do have some time. I don't wanna take forever on it, but if you guys, I mean, if you guys don't feel comfortable on making a decision one way or the other, I mean, the other option would be to probably, in my opinion, I don't think it should wait till the next monthly meeting, you should have a special meeting on it, so. I mean, if we can go past the 10 o'clock hour here, I mean, if it's, I mean, this is an issue worth discussing, we can push the agenda, that's fine. I have limited authority, but I guess the agenda is one thing I do, so. But I mean, my thought is, we had the public hearing, we've had plenty of information. I mean, I feel like a decision should probably get made today, even if we take an extra half hour to do it
So
right now.
what did the most of the public, what was their setback?
Well, I mean, the suggestion from a lot of them was at minimum a mile, and some of them 1.5 miles to 2 miles, and I don't think any one of those, I think the biggest thing we have to remember here is nobody on this board is a pipeline engineer or any kind of specialist in it. But we are the elected officials that are chosen to do the business and the will of the people. I think the people have spoken on it that overwhelmingly, they want a greater setback. They want a safe distance from this pipeline specifically in that public hearing. And like I said, we could discuss this meeting after meeting after meeting, and we're probably gonna have the same feeling, and that feeling is
It's gonna be, yeah.
right, is it enough, is it not enough? Right now, it's 200 feet in Emmons County, which really isn't a setback, and it's 500 feet for the state. So,
Yeah,
are we in agreement that 200 or 500 feet is not enough? I think so,
In
and
my opinion,
I think,
I think 1.5 miles would be
I,
probably not even quite enough, but that would be.
that'd be a starting point, yeah. I mean, that would, yeah.
I think we've made up our minds, I think nobody wants to say it, so I'm just gonna start extracting it from you one by one.
Well,
What
that's
do
what
you, I mean, let's,
That's what
I mean, that's what we're discussing
I
right
think
now, put it on the table.
Minimum 1.5 miles is my opinion, minimum.
Yeah.
On what, CO2 pipeline or hazardous material
Just
pipeline?
a-
Hazardous material pipeline.
Yeah.
I mean,
Depending on
oil
the
pipeline-
diameter of the pipe.
Oil, yeah.
Well,
oil-
these are what we're discussing, I mean, let's
I think
hash it out,
oil
we're in
pipeline-
negotiation.
Water pipeline, whatever, that's 500 feet, 200 feet, I'm okay with that. Oil pipeline,
Yeah, oil.
maybe a quarter mile or something.
Right, this is a different
But
story.
like toxic gas, I think a mile
A
and a
mile and a half
half.
at least, yeah.
That's my opinion.
My opinion, 1.5 to 1.5 miles on hazardous material, if it's identified as hazardous material, going in pipe.
Well, it's oil.
Oil's not hazardous,
I mean, I think it's the gas.
and natural gas is not.
Okay, but like,
Well,
Is it?
I would just make sure that you double check, PHMSA is what decides what's hazardous or not. I didn't look into the specifics, I do know that even at the public hearing, that Summit admitted that CO2 is regulated as a hazardous gas, at least the supercritical pressurized gas was. So, I mean, you might not think oil's hazardous, but it may be under that list, so just
yeah,
Well, that's
be
what
fair.
their
I mean,
definition
that's
is.
right, I mean, that requires a little more research, I mean, that's not just, hazardous isn't just what we agree on, that's what PHMSA says is hazardous, so. I mean, and I think some of those things are deemed hazardous based on the PSI, I mean, there's different varieties of things, that needs to probably take a little more research, so. I mean, I guess just to move the process along, I mean, if we're at least close to a consensus, I mean, that's where bringing the scale back, I mean, we could just start the scale lower. Or, I mean, we could go 0 to 6 inch pipeline is a half mile, a 7 to 12 inch pipeline is a mile, and a 13 to 24 inch would be 1.5 miles. I mean, that's what, I just basically went a quarter mile, half mile, mile. I mean, you could basically do the same thing with a scale and just do half mile, mile, and 3/4 mile. I mean, I feel like if you do a broadcast 1.5 miles for everything, no matter the size or anything, I feel like you're doing the county a disservice.
Then you're doing a disservice.
I feel like that's because I think that creates too much broadcast.
Right.
So I still feel like the scale would be important and it still would be adjustable. We could just do it that way. I mean, that would give you 1.5 miles on a 24 inch pipe.
That's under an unpressurized.
Well, this is just, I mean, this is my calculations and my,
Right, it's.
was only just basically on like a liquid volume in a foot of pipe at that diameter. Not pressurized, nothing.
Seeing last night that father that gave that volume, I think it was 800 million or 80 million cubic feet of material on that 20-mile span pressurized. Can you imagine the volume of material being injected through that break?
Yeah.
And that'll billow like it showed it on this video.
That's why I say, even like you said, you had a 6-inch pipe half mile, right, or quarter mile?
I started out at a quarter mile.
Quarter
because
mile.
But even that is.
You're doing 20 miles pressurized.
No, he's talking about a setback.
I'm saying a setback even on a 6-inch pipe at a quarter mile, it's probably not far enough setback.
No.
I didn't bring it in as gospel.
I know, I'm just saying.
Started a negotiating point here, because I feel like this conversation will continue meeting after meeting after meeting, because I feel like we all have an idea in our mind. We don't want to be the first one to bring it up, and that's why.
Because you'll be ridiculed.
Well, and it doesn't matter about ridicule, it's just, is that number enough? Do you want to be responsible for saying it was a mile when it maybe should have been more, or vice versa? Are you responsible for saying it's a mile and now you don't get another pipeline in your county? And that's why I brought up the scale. I feel like it adds some variability, and with the variance option, I feel like there's a lot of flexibility in this, but yet it's still rigid enough that it protects the folks that just don't want it near their house. I guess that's, so, I mean, I don't want us to drag on meeting after meeting and then we end up overstepping some deadline that we're not aware of or something. We have nothing, especially when it seems to be, for the most part, we had at least a consensus that we're somewhere in the neighborhood. So, I mean.
Well, can we just go with it? I mean, we have to have the size of the pipe now, or can we just go?
I think that's what the pipe is.
Here's
Well,
what
I mean, they're putting it probably 24 inch.
The pipe on this project is
24 inch, can we just decide on that one?
Can I make note to read this here, what was brought up in the notes I got from last night?
Go ahead.
Here it states, hazardous liquid pipelines, it states in Article 5, recommends that the hazardous liquid pipeline routes be kept at least 2 miles from all residents until an updated emergency response plan is approved and recommended otherwise. And to come with a plume, they also talked about having them give them a model of a plume pressurized on a 20-mile span, 24-inch diameter pipe. Show the general public how far with a 20-mile-an-hour wind, how far it's gonna spread out. And with humidity factors, because it's gonna go low and follow the low spots.
I think it's heavy anyway.
It's heavy, right? It'll just settle in from like you got a humid night with humidity, it'll carry down.
I think it's heavy anyway.
I look at Bismarck, what's gonna be up there. Look at Bismarck, where this pipeline is at, and everything is down along the Missouri River. That's where it's gonna go. If there's a northwest wind or northeast wind. Mandan's the same way, and I'm speaking for the county here itself, the people that live within a mile. Just go from your farmstead and look to a mile north. If there's a rupture in that pipeline.
Yeah.
Is a mile far? No, it's not.
Well, not even a mile and a half, I mean, we're trying to make a decision here, a mile and a half far enough.
Is it far enough if somebody dies?
No, it's not.
No.
Well, nothing's far enough if somebody dies, that's the thing.
Yeah, I know.
You gotta come up with a setback, nothing's gonna be far enough if something does happen.
Well, I just, again, would caution against taking too much time, because there are deadlines to this process, and that is the reason why it's getting brought up right now too, so. I'm not saying it's gotta be made right now. I mean, another option too is we could, table it and open it up for discussion later in the meeting, but I think people have attended here today. You know, I don't think they wanna sit here all day either, so.
This is perpetual, this decision.
Well, it is amendable, but there's a process, right? I mean, but yeah, I mean, you have to remember, it's at least in the near future, right? I mean, you make a decision and then it goes on to the PSC and this process gets followed through all the way, then yes, once this pipeline is built with the setbacks that are in place, if those are the ones that are honored and the PSC honors it, then yeah, then it's not changeable for that, you know? That project will be where it is, and so, for that.
This is their proposed footprint that they decided to put. But now the people are pushing back on these farmsteads that we want, say, allowed to have 2 miles setback from their place, from the center of their footprint back. And they can work around these farmsteads if they need to. They do make 90-degree and 45-degree angle elbows and move it, go around and go your pattern again.
Oh, I said they did that on all the state land, they come to state land, they go around that.
Yep. Because you're working with the state with their terms and conditions of what they want.
I know,
We don't have our own easements.
I know, but
Well, I think we should come up with some mile and a half, 2 miles, whatever, I think, come up with something and go for it.
I'd say a 2-mile setback from the center line of this proposed plan for any established residence. That's my opinion.
Is that a motion? Or just an opinion?
I guess I could be the one to make the motion. I'll make a motion that it's a 2-mile setback from any established residence or farmstead or occupied,
well, I mean, occupied and on.
not unoccupied. no.
Right, well, okay, we have,
Unoccupied.
hold on, we have
Go
a
ahead.
motion. The motion is for a 2-mile setback off the center line of the design pipeline. Is there a second to that motion? If you want a discussion, then second it, otherwise, the motion dies for lack of a second. Is there a second to that motion?
So, wait, are we still talking,
We're not
just
talking about anything, we're making a motion, so if you
Okay.
wanna discuss it, then I would second the motion and we can enter discussion if you'd like, otherwise allow it to die for lack of a second.
Well, I'll second it then.
Seconded by Commissioner Holm. Now we're on discussion of the motion of a 2-mile setback. Commissioner Eberly.
so we're just talking dangerous gases?
Well, that is the only reason why,
That's fine too.
if we're going to make a motion, then we should probably either. Joe, we can't make motions just on specific parts of the ordinance, right? We basically have to have an amended ordinance and then pass the amended ordinance.
Right, I think that'd be easier if you guys can come up with a consensus as far as
Instead of making
what's
separate
going to
motions.
be in the ordinance.
Right.
I'm trying to keep up with each part that's been proposed, but
Because if we're talking oil now, everything, all pipelines, then that's a little too far.
That's too far. I would say hazardous material.
Yeah.
It's identified as hazardous material. That's my opinion.
Well, you can just say, CO2 pipeline.
Yeah, well, I mean, what if there's other dangerous gas that wanna come through, that'd be the
I
same.
mean, we should be able to
Then we can
negotiate.
wrestle it at that time, right? Or can't we, Aaron? Can we wrestle at that time if it's another
When
product?
another one comes through, we can,
I mean, you can,
Yeah,
but
that's what I think.
I would just caution against a couple things, and the one thing I would caution against is specifically labeling one material over the others. Just for the sake of, it seems to, well, I mean, that is being challenged. It's being challenged in court in other places where people have gone too specific with one material.
So,
The other thing to remember is, if you go and you create a setback, you just create it 2 miles, and then this project gets stopped, or it is drastically more expensive to create, and then you go and adjust your setback 6 months or a year later, it's basically the same thing. I mean, you're basically discriminating against one particular project, and whether or not you want to discriminate against that project is one thing or another, but I would caution against that just for the simple fact that if you're going to go that far, you're gonna open yourself up to a legal challenge. And that's one thing I've tried to direct this entire process, is that I don't wanna be to the point where we're discriminating against a specific project or a specific material to the point where we end up in a legal mud mess and we end up with nothing or having to amend it again later when we could have just came up with, in my mind, probably just something a little more reasonable, included all of them. The variance, in my mind, allows someone, if you think it's an oil pipeline, and even though it qualifies under this huge setback, you're not as concerned as CO2, you have the variance option where you can allow that, and the individual landowners can dictate if they think it's worth the risk, and not the county going through and trying to isolate everything and making everything perfect. I think the variance allows that. If you don't want a pipeline near your place, doesn't matter if it's got fairy dust or CO2, it's gotta stay X amount of feet away, that's the setback. And if you're not concerned at all about any of the material and the money they offered you or the guarantees they offered you are worth the risk, then you have the variance, you can put it wherever you want. I feel like you can't create too big of a setback, in my mind, that you just, unless you're gonna include everybody. And I think if you include everybody, that's a different story, but we obviously, you know, we have different beliefs on even the material, so I don't wanna just get too,
Well, you can't put this 2-mile setback on the water line.
Well, so his,
right, that's what I'm getting
right,
at.
so his, motion won't be with the variance in it then.
Well, motion would, because that part is with, the main thing we're discussing is the initial setback. The variance will correlate with the setback. So like right now,
Okay,
the
yeah.
variance is from a setback 2640, because that was what we passed in the first reading. But if we make it all of a sudden, we make it a mile, then that basically gets amended with that too. I mean, that'd be a part, the whole point of the variance is that anything inside of that setback has to be agreed to by the landowner and the company.
Right, and that's what I would be.
Right, so the variance would go along with, if you wanted the setback to be 10,000 feet, then the variance is for inside of 10,000 feet. That would basically
No, I'm
correlate.
saying that we wouldn't want more than 2 months, but if, consumer wants it less, that's fine with me. I wouldn't have a problem with
I
that.
would say for the sake of this process and everything that we're going about and listening to Joe about it too, I think the idea would be to, you know, probably come up with an amended document and vote on it all at once, because if you go for just the setback, because my belief, we have to include CO2 in the description, along with gas, oil, coal slurry, electrical transmission that's already there. We're saying a gas line, but it's liquid gas. Does that qualify? Does that count? I think CO2 needs to be labeled in this. It needs to be updated to include CO2, along with the other materials that we've had with the pipeline.
Well, what's the Dapple pipeline setback?
Well, that one, to my knowledge, it would have followed what's in the blue book at 200 feet, which wouldn't have mattered, so they would have went by the state setback at 500 feet. Unless, you know, somebody negotiated that own setback individually with each easement, they might have done that, but the state setback was 500 feet on that.
And PSC will override this if they feel it's,
Yeah, I mean,
They can't.
the tone that I've had and the reading that I had is that the PSC can decide if this, you know, if you pass a 2-mile setback and they think it's unreasonable, they can void it. I don't know where to land after that. Will they cut it in half? Will they just fall back to the state's entry code? I don't know.
we don't know that.
I don't know that, because with the Dapple pipeline, the 500-foot setback in the state code is obviously what was there, because nothing was updated at Emmons County's level, so if you don't update it at your county level, or if you're not, you know, different than the state, then it falls back on the state, so.
When I listened to it last night, being we're on the end of this,
Yeah.
Emmons and Burley, and pushback from Burley was all pushback
Right.
last night. And we're not an area like Bismarck, the city of Bismarck is a population.
Right.
We're a rural area.
It's worse up there.
We still kill one round.
So we're on the end of this, so
Well,
I don't know.
I think
what
right
to
now,
say.
I think what we'll do is, we'll call the question, but I guess my suggestion is that we deny this motion, and the reason being that is I don't think it's descriptive enough.
Right.
I think we should also include some of these other things. If you wanna include the 2-mile setback
it should
still,
too,
I think the motion should include some of these other things to at least include CO2 in subsection B, along with gas, oil, coal slurry. And you should probably amend the distance from the other buildings or surface body water, which we agreed 200 feet is probably not enough, and any other descriptions we wanna do, and then we'll just amend the document and vote on that.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
so when we do this though, like you said, let's say a farmer, you still say they can do what they want?
Well, I mean, there's probably some state guideline they may have to still follow. I don't think they can maybe go inside the 500, maybe they can't even that, I don't know, but they could go, the variance would allow them to go inside of the county setback.
No, but then let's say, okay, let's say I want it to come right up next to my house, 500 feet away. Now I got you living right on the other side of the road. He's still, I mean, he's not a mile and a half from that farm. You know what I mean?
Well, you still have to be, even if that guy, if he crosses that, you know, you still have to be so far from the other farm too, yet though.
Right, if they're within close proximity, less than 2
Wow.
miles.
So that's what I mean, if each is live across the road, if there's 3 farmers that live right together, there's one farmer says, well, I just want to go by my house, and there's other 2 farmers, where do they?
Well, in my mind with that one, you'd have to get 3 variances. And if one didn't agree with it, then you wouldn't be able to put that close to that one.
This one guy, I'm gonna say, well, this is my land, I can do what I want.
Right, I mean, and that's where the difficulty comes in with the discussion on it too, so. But I think we should call the question, so. A yes would be to approve Commissioner Materi's motion, and second by Commissioner Holm for a 2-mile setback. A no would be to deny it. Madam Auditor, will you call the roll?
Wait, so now but we're not voting on it.
No, well, I don't wanna amend that motion, because it's gonna be messy. I think we should, in my opinion, since
should
we're still
deny it.
discussing it, in my mind, if you don't feel like this is descriptive enough, you should deny the motion, and we'll go back to amending the document, and we'll have an amendment. So otherwise, if we amend the motion, and we have to vote on the amended motion, it is gonna be a mess. So I think just, if you feel like the motion's not enough, and that's where we're at, deny it. If you feel like it's enough and you wanna move forward, then vote yes to approve it.
Commissioner Everly,
No.
Commissioner Holm,
No.
Commissioner Culver,
No,
Commissioner Magrum,
No.
Commissioner Materi.
No.
Okay, so the motion is denied. So, I guess to try and simplify it a little bit, we should have a setback, and then there should be an amendment to section, the beginning of section B, which includes CO2. And then the setback from any other building. And if we don't come to an agreement, then I guess at some point we'll just stop this, and we'll have to table it or do something else. So I'm not directing what needs to, I'm just saying that's the document.
Yeah.
We should amend it that way. If someone comes up with an amendment and wants to make an emotion as that amended and it gets seconded, we vote on it. No, but one person is steering it. And then I guess, in my mind, it depends on if you're going on a scale or not, because if you do go on the scale, then the
Scale meeting one.
well, like we said, if you go on the diameter. If you wanna base it that way, then you should probably change the language so it says that it doesnesn't pass within the calculated setback based on pipe diameter, or something, rather than a specific distance, because that will do it, so.
So is there any pipeline?
I'm just gonna tell you, I'm gonna allow for about 15 more minutes, and if we don't come to a discussion, we'll have to table it for another time, so.
So is this for any pipeline now?
Well, this would be for, the section B would be for electrical transmission facilities, gas, oil, and coal slurry. That's what's in the current document. Now, electrical transmission really doesn't count this because we're basically discussing the setbacks for a pipeline, not a transmission line, so. We're on the subsection B, which is dealing with the pipeline. So even though that section B, the beginning of it, describes everything under it, the subsection for electrical facilities is further down in the book. So just so you know, we're only amending basically the pipeline setbacks at this time, so. And those pipeline setbacks are for gas, oil, coal slurry, and water.
But no, we're not distinguishing that between.
No, we're not distinguishing between any of those with this pipeline unless you call it out in the amended document then. So you can remove things from section B, like if you don't want oil to be included, but then you don't have a setback for oil at all. You're referring to the state, so, I mean, those are the complications of the process here, so. But the transmission for electrical facilities, I mean, that's further, that's in different subsections, we're not amending
You
it,
don't want
so.
that in there.
So that's basically not being impacted at this time. It's gonna be the setbacks for pipelines and anything that goes inside the pipeline now. Now, if there's an electrical line inside of a huge pipeline, I suppose that would fall under that too, but that really doesn't seem to happen or hasn't happened.
Yeah.
So, just saying it's probably inevitable with that too, but I'll just offer my suggestions just to kickstart the process, so. I believe that subsection B should be amended to include CO2. I would also like to include non-potable water, because we're trying to create a scenario where potable water is not included in this. We don't want to limit, you know,
Right.
water pipelines have been necessary for the whole county, so.
That's for man.
So for subsection B, the beginning would include CO2, non-potable water, or any other substance deemed hazardous by PHMSA. That's would be the description that encompasses the setback. That would be my first part. And then the second part would be, actually, you know, I don't know if the center line of the pipeline would be the right way, because if, I mean, if you go off the right of way, then that just increases the setback, I guess, so it would, if we go off the center line of the pipeline, then their right of way is included in the setback, you know what I mean? Like if you have the pipeline, and then you go, so actually you'd have a greater setback if you went from the right of way, which
Right.
maybe is the right way to do it then. So,
Right.
I mean, rather than go off the center line, if they wanna use an entire blanket easement, make a huge easement, then the setback's even greater, I guess, so.
Right.
So if you wanna argue that, then you should keep it as off of the right of way. So that part's fine, that was the original suggestion I made, so. The amendment would be to, if we amend this to include CO2, non-potable water, any other substance deemed hazardous by PHMSA. And then, I think if we create a setback of 500 feet from any other building or surface water, rather than the 200.
Yeah,
That's like that's just a building out in the middle of nowhere, 500 feet.
right.
I think you gotta start somewhere, I mean, that might not be far enough for some people, but you can't make it impossible to traverse the country either. So 500 feet off of any other building. The other part would be under the variance, at the last sentence says pipelines construction for the transmission of water are not subject to the setback. I would include potable water, just to describe, because there are different types of water that could come through here that could be hazardous or something too. We wanna make sure we probably spell out the difference between salt water or something like that versus potable water, so. So that would be another amendment. And then the only other thing to be amended would be the setback. What would be the setback, or if you wanna go based on pipe diameter, that would be the last things to do.
And
I think we're probably in agreement with these things I just brought up. Now, I mean, those things, let's just include that. That's part of the amended document, and now we just have to settle on a setback. I think, in my mind, going on the size of the pipe is probably an important factor, and, I mean, to answer your guys' call, or just to speed this process up, if you wanna go 0 to 6-inch pipeline starts at a half mile,
I think that'd be better.
and then the 7 to 12-inch would be a mile. You're basically just doubling the distance for every diameter window. And then above a 12-inch basically be like, I put 13 to 24-inch just for the sake of 24 is the biggest been proposed. That would be a mile and a half, so that would be, what would that be, 70, trying to do my math in my head here, so then 5280 plus 2640 would be 7920.
You're saying from the center of the pipeline or from the east?
From the
edge.
From the
corner described.
from the right of way,
So say from
so the right of way
Right
boundary,
away,
basically.
you know, they're out.
Which that says here indicates from the pipeline right of way, which would basically be the end of it, the edge of it. I mean, if that's the setback, I mean, we're all talking, that's the size.
But that's still not defining gas or oil or dangerous gas.
Well, that'd be all of them, that'd be
Yeah.
everything.
It would
It'd all
cover
be under, that would cover oil and all that, and then the landowners could decide if that is hazardous enough for them, if they want it
Right.
closer, then they can negotiate
If
it
they want it
down.
closer, they put.
But if anybody's in agreement with that,
I think
Attorney Hanson, do you think that covers most of the bases, or is there something we're missing?
Well, I think you have all the
Particulars covered.
particulars that you've discussed. It does cover, so if someone wants to make that motion.
Okay.
and let them come up with this house and get contract.
Well. I guess those are the amendments that I'd be willing to offer, that make the most sense, cover a lot of the discussion we've had. If anybody agrees with those, I'd entertain a motion, either that or to amend any of the other things we discussed, I guess.
So from the 12 inches a mile, and then what's the next size? Just or anything over 12 inch?
Well, I mean, in this scenario, I created a diameter scale of 13 inches to 24 inches.
13 to 24.
Anything above a 24, I guess, we
And that would
have
be
it
at
set.
a mile and a half.
And that would be at a mile and a half.
I'd say it should be 2 miles if it's pressurized. If it's a liquid flow, not pressurized, 1.5 miles.
But then you're,
That's my opinion.
right, but then
yes.
you're different, you know, because we're just going with all the pipeline now, so you kinda,
That's what's so bad.
Well, and then you're gonna have to specify the PSI because every pipeline is pressurized, but it's.
I think that's the difference there.
Now,
I would caution not to just get too,
Right.
I think you can get too particular.
The money happens to that.
little bit better.
Well, I think for the sake of time, I think we either need to have a motion somewhat close to that amendment or some other amendments, or we need to table this for a different time, so.
I'll make a motion on what you recommend to.
Okay, so Commissioner Holm makes the motion to include CO2, non-potable water, or any other substance deemed hazardous by PHMSA to the section B. So then we would also increase the setback of any other building or surface body of water to 500 feet. Also include that pipelines constructed for the transmission of potable water are not subject to the setback from inhabited residents. And then we would also have a diameter scale basically of 0 to 6 inches. The pipe, the setback would be 2,640 feet. For a 7-inch to 12-inch pipe, the setback would be 5,280 feet. And for a 13-inch to 24-inch pipe, the setback would be 1.5 miles, which I believe is 7,920 feet.
Commissioner Magrum, can I say something?
No, we are in a motion here, so is there a second to that motion? Is there a second to that motion? Is there a second to that motion? Not hearing any, the motion dies for lack of a second. Is there another motion with an amended distance? If there isn't gonna be another motion, then I would suggest that we table this for another time, because we're just spinning our wheels now, so.
I'm just not quite sure. I just don't quite.
If we table it, then what's gonna be the suggestion? We table it for later in the meeting, or do you wanna have a special meeting? If you wait till the next monthly meeting, which I would caution against.
I'd say table it, maybe we can get an experimental model done by someone, what this plume will be pressurized and how far a distance it'll be. That's my opinion, how many cubic feet it's gonna be. People don't know, there aren't a lot of questions answered. And that's my opinion, that's just one opinion. And I sit to be overridden on the opinion, you know.
Well, I think that your opinion is fine, but I think that the issue of time, I don't know who would do it and how long it would take to do, so that's kind of the issue with that, so.
Are we okay with the reading portion? Have we read, does it take 3 readings of this
No,
resolution?
it doesn't, we could have acted at the public hearing, but with 2 commissioners missing, we didn't feel like it was proper to act on it, so. So, the second reading is over, we're in the amending stage, so, Bernice, did you wish to say something, since we're no longer in?
Well, you went from 2 miles to a mile and a half, and now you seem like you're rushed into trying to make a decision. I'm thinking you should take some time on this and think about it, and if you have to have a special meeting, because I feel like you're pushing them into making a decision, and this is huge.
Well, like I said, yeah, thanks, Bernice, I don't wanna rush the decision, what I don't want is I don't want to drag out for another month, and so if you're going to table it, then we should probably have a special meeting, and it should probably sometime between here and the next month, but now we're also gonna run into situations of doctor's appointments and vacations, and then 1 or 2 people are missing again, and that is why the reason why I advocate. I don't feel like we're that far off on it. I feel like a decision should probably just get made. If you want 2 miles, just make it 2 miles, like I mean, if you think that's gonna hold and that's what you want, then let's do it, like I don't wanna, I mean, you don't wanna haggle over a half mile and spend another 2 weeks or another month, and then you miss a deadline because somebody was afraid to make the motion for 2 miles. I mean, if you want 2 miles,
It just,
then amend it.
I'm trying to, if it was like water and oil and non-hazardous materials,
Mhm.
that would be one set of guidelines for that kind of pipeline. And if we have another pipeline where we have all kinds of hazardous gases and stuff, that would be another set. That's how I feel.
I understand that, but did you come prepared today knowing what's hazardous and what's not though?
No.
Because that's the point I'm trying to make is we're trying to differentiate from things and it seems like nobody did their homework on what's differentiable or not. You can't make those decisions in here because you say it's for hazardous pipelines and not for oil and you find out that oil is hazardous or not. I don't know. I didn't look enough into the PHMSA requirements.
Well, is it identified as hazardous material?
I don't know. That's what I'm
I
saying.
don't believe it is.
Well, if you
That's my
wanna,
opinion.
if we wanna take a, if we wanna have a special meeting in 2 weeks and do that kind of research and go through it, I'm all for that.
Okay.
What I don't want is I don't want it to drag out another month or another 6 weeks or another 8 weeks and then we miss a deadline and now we have nothing when we agreed we wanted to do something. That's the main thing, so.
This is perpetual, this decision. This is forever.
So if we wanna have a special meeting, I mean, I would suggest we do it within a week. I don't know if you need that much more time than a week. Yeah, see, you're gonna be going on vacation, that's exactly what I was afraid of, then we're gonna have one less guy here, that's also the trouble, I mean,
No, you gotta make a point that we're here.
well, I'd say for now, I guess for the sake of time, since nobody wants to make a decision, we'll table this till later in the meeting, we'll discuss it again at 2:30. And then we'll make a decision from there, because we're starting to burn away time here, so, yeah. So we're gonna table it until 2:30. Next up on the agenda will be, you know what, let's take a 5-minute recess here, and then we'll come back.
That was submitted,